Tonight, a growing list of legal woes for our president. Donald Trump facing 17 lawsuits and investigations. You heard me right. We've got the very latest on what's going on in Trump world. Then, the alarming new report that details how the Russians meddled not just in our elections in 2016, but how they're still doing it. Also, the new HBO film about families separated at the border. It's an emotional story told through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who cannot see his parents because he is locked up. The writer and director joins us tonight. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We have those stories, plus also some positive news that came out of Washington, believe it or not, that later in the program. Now, one thing you can say about this White House is it is never boring. In just the past news cycle, we have major developments in the Russia probe, the Trump Foundation, Trump Tower Moscow, and more. Plus, in just 24 hours, two major lies have been exposed to be added to the list. Let's start with Michael Flynn. You know, the former national security advisor who was fired by President Trump. Flynn, he was in court yesterday, and we expected to get his sentence for lying to the FBI, but the judge, he delayed it. And at the hearing, Flynn was forced to acknowledge the truth, that he knew he was lying to the FBI and he knew it was a crime, and he did not challenge the way the FBI dealt with him. He said he was dealt with fairly. Now, that blew up a major narrative of Flynn's attorneys and also other defenders like the White House. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention what the judge had to say about Michael Flynn just yesterday. Judge Sullivan said that Flynn committed, quote, a very serious offense, also telling Flynn, arguably, you sold your country out. He also said to Flynn that he committed a very serious crime. You can't minimize that. Quick reminder of what Flynn actually did. Flynn lied about his contact with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the transition in 2016 when they discussed sanctions that we had levied against Russia and continue to have, among other very important topics. Flynn also lied about lobbying work that he did for Turkey to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Flynn was paid to help influence the U.S. government to try and extradite on American soil a Turkish cleric who was in Pennsylvania to try and send him to Turkey. Now, the Turks say that cleric was behind a coup. You can do the math. Obviously, if he was brought back to Turkey, to say he'd be in serious danger would be, I would say, a major understatement. Now, despite all that, the White House and Flynn and his defenders, they've been saying that the FBI set a perjury trap for Flynn and the Bureau tried to trick and bully him. Take a listen to the White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders sticking to her guns.
The FBI broke standard protocol in the way that they came in and ambushed General Flynn, and in the way that they questioned him, and in the way that they encouraged him not to have White House counsel's office present. Those are facts, and certainly there may be other issues there, but that we don't have any reason to want to walk that back.
Except that Michael Flynn doesn't agree that's what happened, in fact, testified to in court. Now, Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, he also piled on the Justice Department and the FBI. It is sometimes hard to believe Rudy was a former U.S. attorney. Take a listen to former Mayor of America.
I am disgusted with the tactics they have used in this case. What they did to General Flynn should result in discipline. They're the ones who are violating the law. They're looking at a non-crime collusion. The other guys are looking at a non-crime campaign violations, which are not violations. And they are the ones who are violating the law, the rules, the ethics, and nobody wants to look at them.
Just as a reminder, Flynn lied to his own chief of staff and to the vice president who went on national TV and parroted Flynn's defense. Because of those lies, his boss, the president, fired him. And Flynn admitted in court that he lied. He acknowledged it was very serious, and no, he was not mistreated by the FBI in any way, shape, or form, yet the lies continue from the White House and the acolytes. All right, now let's go to the Trump Tower in Moscow. The president and his team, they have been steadfast, denying that he did any business with the Russians. But Rudy Giuliani just issued another statement about the project, quote, it was a real estate project. There was a letter of intent to go forward, but no one signed it. Nothing to see here. Now, that is totally not true. CNN got their hands on a letter of intent to move forward, and guess what? It's signed by one guy called Donald J. Trump. Oops. It also makes all of what you're about to hear simply, again familiar, not true.
I have nothing to do with Russia.
I mean, I have nothing to do with Russia. I don't have any jobs in Russia. I'm all over the world, but we're not involved in Russia.
I have no deals in Russia. I have no deals that could happen in Russia because we've stayed away. We could make deals in Russia very easily if we wanted to. I just don't want to because I think that would be a conflict.
She always likes to tie me in with Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia, folks.
I have nothing to do with Russia. I have, John, how many times do I have to say it? Are you a smart man? I have nothing to do with Russia. I have nothing to do with Russia. How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is
on
a
it?
ruse.
A ruse. Except, by the way, that Trump Tower within the proposal was a $50 million penthouse that would have been given gratis to one guy called Vladimir Putin. But again, Trump knows nothing about Russia, doesn't know anything about Putin at the time. We all heard that. Okay, now let's move on. David Pecker, the aptly named publisher of the National Enquirer. He cut a deal with prosecutors after admitting the magazine paid hush money to a former Playboy bunny, all to suppress her story about her alleged affair with Trump. The quote-unquote catch and kill approach was also used with, yes, Stormy Daniels. We also know that Pecker kept the safe with potentially damaging stories about Trump. By the way, multiple reports also saying Donald Trump wasn't some unknown player in this party. He apparently was in the room when Pecker and Cohen discussed those hush money payments. It exposes another lie from President Trump. Remember when he flat out denied he knew anything about these so-called payments? Take a listen to Trump on Air Force One just this year.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels? Then why did Michael Flynn make it if there was no truth or allegation?
You have to ask Michael Flynn. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
Again, he was his attorney now. Now he's the rat. Okay. Now, we are learning more about what the Enquirer might in fact have on Trump beyond just some of the hush money payments. Here's a former LA bureau chief, okay, for that said magazine.
Do you have reason to believe Mr. Pecker knew other incriminating things about Trump that have not come out?
Yes, certainly.
Do you know what any of those are?
I know some of them. And there are stories involving, of course, the Trump-Kushner family.
Would you characterize them as merely embarrassing, if you will, or do any of them arise to the level of being potentially criminal?
Well, actually, both. I mean, they're certainly embarrassing. And then when you get involved with, the actions of his children, including his daughter and son-in-law, we're getting closer to criminal activity.
So there's that. Then there is the unnamed company owned by a foreign country that has just been forced to comply with a subpoena. That subpoena appears to be from one guy called Bob Mueller. This, so shrouded in mystery, but the ruling could be significant. It came down after attorneys argued in a secret hearing before a panel of 3 appellate judges while the entire floor was on lockdown. I am sure we're going to be hearing much more about that in the coming weeks. And don't forget about the Trump Foundation, as much as we'd like to. The foundation is a charity. Now, we all know what charities do and who they're supposed to help, but we have to use that term loosely in this case because this was just dissolved as the New York Attorney General ramps up its investigation. The AG's lawsuit issued a blistering attack on the foundation, saying the organization was, quote, little more than a checkbook for payments from Mr. Trump or the Trump organization. Suit also claims there is a, quote, shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing, and much more. Now, the foundation's liquidating. It's being forced to sell off its assets. That includes a Denver Broncos helmet signed by Tebow, the portraits of Donald Trump, that were all hanging in his golf clubs, both purchased with foundation funds, total value of 42 grand. But just think about it. A charity? You're taking the money from that, and I believe there's a lot more, we're going to get into it, to line your own pockets? Really? Now, the largest donation in the foundation's history benefited Trump's business. It paid $250,000 to the Central Park Conservancy to renovate the fountain in front of Trump Plaza Hotel. Really. Trump, of course, going on a Twitter tirade about the whole thing. I'll do everyone a favor and paraphrase them. Here we go. He says the foundation has done great work and given away lots of money. He also tweets the suit is politically motivated. Of course, he calls the former AG Eric Schneiderman a sleazeball and, of course, also took pot shots at the Clinton Foundation. Now, this is just one of more than a dozen investigations into Trump and his companies. There are no less than 17 separate investigations. They include the probes by Mueller, probes of the Trump Organization by the Southern District of New York, investigations by attorneys general of both D.C. and Maryland, a probe of his inauguration, $107 million, by the way, the people are still wondering where that money went. They're also investigating his transition and so much more. They are all on your screen, and we could barely fit all of them. Think about that. At the end of the day, one of these things have in common with all the others. It's money. Trump always seems to be looking to make a buck, whether it be with a charity, whether it be with taxpayer dollars, whether it even be with his own inauguration fund. And if you follow the thread here, criminality and illegality seem to be going hand in hand. We will see the investigation, as they say, or investigations, continue. All right, coming up next, ABC News political director Rick Klein. He'll join us to talk about the latest on the looming government shutdown, or maybe not so much here, and also Trump's stunning decision today to pull troops from Syria.